Let us pray. O God, from whom all holy desires, all good counsels, and all just works do proceed, give unto thy servants that peace which the world cannot give, that both our hearts may be set to obey thy commandments, and also that by thee we, being defended from the fear of our enemies, may pass our time in rest and quietness through the merits of Jesus Christ, our Savior. For the members of the Senate and those who make our laws, give courage, wisdom, and foresight to provide for the needs of all our people and to fulfill our obligations in the community of nations. Let us together say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
The Senate is in session.
Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Announcements by Your Honor the President.
I have apologies for lateness from Senator Walcott, Senator Tate, Senator Drakes. And I have apologies for absence from Senator Dr. Springer and Senator Moore. And also our chaplain is asked to be excused today. He is absent. And I have a notice here, the minutes for our meeting held on July 21st, those will be deferred.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers. Reports from select committees, questions to ministers, request for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries, personal explanations, motions relating to the business or sittings of the Senate, moved by a minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I beg to move that Standing Orders 22.1 and 45.2 be suspended for the remainder of the sitting.
The question is that Standing Orders 22.1 and 45.2 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting. Those honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Who thinks the ayes have it?
Introduction of bills.
Senator McConney.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of the Governor General Conditions of Service Amendment Bill 2021, of the Ministers and Parliamentary Secretaries Remuneration and Allowances Amendment Bill 2021, of the Constitution Amendment Bill 2021, and of the resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, the vesting in the National Housing Corporation of the parcel of land at White Park Road and Country Road. I also beg to move the first reading of the Governor General Conditions of Service Amendment Bill 2021, the Ministers and Parliamentary Secretaries Remuneration and Allowances Amendment Bill 2021, and the Constitution Amendment Bill 2021.
The question is that those aforementioned bills be read a first time. Those honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Public business, sir.
Public business is now the order of the day.
Order number 1.
Order number 1.
In the name of the Honourable Acting Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Defence Amendment Bill 2021.
Senator McConney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Defence Amendment Bill 2021 that is now before this Honourable Chamber, it seeks to amend the Substantive Defence Act, Cap 159, and to do so, sir, in order to broaden the officer corps and to make use of the expertise of retired officers and to provide for related matters as it relates to the Barbados Defence Force. Mr. President, when this, or should this bill now pass, we would seek in so doing to increase the age, sir, at which an officer may be appointed to serve, certainly in one situation, as Chief of Staff of the Barbados Defence Force. And it would allow, sir, a person to be appointed who is no longer a member of the regular Defence Force. And I will explain these different layers throughout my presentation. And it would also validate any previous appointments of persons to the position of Chief of Staff who may have been over 55 years old and would not necessarily also have been a member of the Defence Force. Now, sir, you can see there are many different layers and levels to this particular bill. But before, sir, I get into those areas, I want to share a little bit about the Defence Force. The Barbados Defence Act 1979, it created a body of Her Majesty's forces to be known as the Barbados Defence Force. And this body consisted of the regular forces, which would be your full-time soldiers, a reserve force, to be known as the Barbados Defence Force Reserve, and of course the cadet force, which is the youth side of this discipline. And when we look at the structure, Mr. President, we see the headquarters, of course, we see the Barbados Regiment. That is the land forces. That is the land force element of the Barbados Defence Force, and it's made up of both regular and reserve units. We also see, sir, the Barbados Coast Guard, which deals with the sea. It is that maritime element of the force, which also has regular and reserve subunits. The Youth Development wing of it, which comprises the Barbados Cadet Corps, more recently the Youth Advance Corps, Youth Advance Scheme. And there was a time, sir, when many would also have associated the Barbados Defense Force Sports Program, which is no longer part of that, but it used to be an important part of that structure as well. And sir, as I go forward, I really just want to say there are many things that we will say about each of these different parts of the structure of the Barbados Defense Force, but I particularly have a love for the sports program that is not there right now. As a former national athlete for Barbados, I had the great opportunity to compete locally and abroad, and to go to school with some members who were on scholarship with me, track and field scholarship from Barbados in the United States, who were products of that sports program. It has now gone a different way, but I do want to say that the Barbados Defense Force, in all its many different programs and forces within its structure, have made a contribution. And I had to, sir, speak to that one because that one was very near and dear to my heart. But of course, there will be others of which we will speak. The Barbados Defense Force, as you know, sir, is responsible for the defense of Barbados and such other duties as the Defense Board, which has governance in that regard, as they may determine. And the Chief of Staff of the Barbados Defense Force falls under the direction of the Governor General and is responsible for the operational use of the force. And I thought it was important for us to give people an understanding of what exactly is the Barbados Defense Force and all the different parts that's made up. And I'm sure if I have missed any, my honorable senators will certainly add at this point in time. But to understand that the service of the Barbados Defense Force is broad, it is significant, and it has been impactful in this country. And I want to express certainly gratitude as we consider this Defense Amendment Bill 2021 to the Defense Force who has assisted during disasters. They have assisted, the Barbados Defense Force has assisted with the proper authority of the Governor General to carry out joint patrols with our police at times when the protection of the people of this country was significant. I want to give gratitude for the work they have done with regards to drug interdiction, with rescuing fishermen, with offshore patrols to safeguard our territorial waters, with logistics and security on so many different levels. Many people will remember the cricket. Many people remember crop over. Many people would remember many different areas in which the Barbados Defense Force has given its service from a logistics and security perspective, because they have an expertise, an acute expertise in these areas that we do not find in many different pockets of professions in Barbados. We want to give gratitude to them for assisting, as we would recently have heard, with the distribution of food at a time when we were in national crisis. And as part of the social protection of our people, they sought to bring again their logistical skills and their ability to organize and mobilize to the table for the people of this country. To thank them for to be grateful to the Barbados Defense Force to the work it has done with the field medical hospitals when we need to set up those hospitals at great rate, with the hyperbaric chamber that has been there to help save the lives of many divers. I can go on, and sir, I thought that I would give gratitude for all these things because I think sometimes we miss the breadth of work and the breadth of engagement of the Barbados Defense Force in protecting this country on so many different fronts. Sir, we have trained, we have in Barbados many highly skilled, well-trained, disciplined men and women who are products of the Barbados Defense Force, who still have many years of experience that they can give to continue to protect Barbados and to develop the new cadre of soldiers and persons who are in the protective service of the Defense Force and others. And the current situation that we have, which is being addressed by this amendment that is being proposed in this bill, is that a number of these trained and skilled and experienced and experts are being asked to retire at 55 years old. And I know that there are many of us in here, and I am counting, looking around and counting, who are past 55 years old. And were they told to retire now that they can no longer contribute that vast experience and expertise that they have? It would be an injustice to this country. We know too, Mr. President, that around the world, people are living longer, they're having more productive lives, and they are contributing professionally for longer periods of times than we have traditionally done, that they may have done 50 years ago or 60 years ago. And so, sir, it is important that as Barbados sees itself as a country that is able to optimize its human resources, perhaps the greatest pieces of bits of capital we have are our people, that we are able to capitalize and optimize the potential and the skills of these people, especially at a time like now where our population is moving in a direction based on recent studies that says that Barbados is not producing enough people fast enough to be able to to sustain us going forward. Thank you, Senator Franklin, for the efforts that you're making in that regard. And sir, and so as we seek to grapple with many things, it is important that we be able to have all hands on deck across all generations to be able to take Barbados to the very next level. Currently, sir, the current situation is that the Defense Board cannot consider for appointment to the office of Chief of Staff a person who has passed his 55th year, since that person, under the regulations, will have ceased to be a member of the Barbados Defense Force. So at 55, you cease to be a member of the Barbados Defense Force, the regular Barbados Defense Force, the regular soldiers. And remember, I said there's regular and there's reserve. And so one would imagine that once you have had to retire from the regular soldiering life of the Barbados Defense Force, you have the opportunity to go to be a reservist. Well, that retirement age there too is 55. And colonels, persons of that title, or rank I should say, are not allowed to go into the reserve. And so we have a situation, and just so I can break down the reservist situation, you've got the first class and the second class reservists. And the first class, there are those who you will see at parades. You will also see them going to training at specified times. There are also those who will take on extra duties at a time when there is need for extra resources to be added to the duties of the Barbados Defense Force. Those are your first class reservists. And then you have your second class ones. They will not necessarily, you will not normally see them at parades. They will not necessarily go to training. However, in the event that we have a national emergency or disaster, they're still on the books and they can be called up as reservists, etc. And so, sir, again, we have a situation where once you reach a certain age there, you cannot be a reservist. And then certain ranks cannot go into the reserves. Again, sir, that is an unnecessary waste of resources and training and experience that is going down the drain, and Barbados cannot afford for that kind of waste. Sir, that is one of the anomalies in this situation that we are seeking to rectify. One, where you can be appointed as chief of staff, excuse me, even if you are not a member of the Barbados Defense Force, and to increase the age at which you can be chief of staff and serve in that capacity. Sir, we hide nothing. And so we have certainly found, sir, that there are situations that have happened in the past when very distinguished people who have served as chief of staff within the Barbados Defense Force were indeed appointed when they were past the age of 55. And at that time, it was not noticed or it was not realized that that person at that time was past that age. And that person went on to serve in distinguished manner that has been recognized in the Defense Force. And I think what it does, it supports the fact that persons who are past the age of 55 have worth and value and a serious contribution to make in the success of Barbados, not just our Barbados Defense Force. And sir, in situations where that had happened, in a situation where that had happened, certainly one in particular that has come to mind, and I do not have your permission, sir, to call names, so I will not violate the rules of this honorable house. That individual would have signed some contracts, they would have done some promotions, whether temporary or otherwise. They would have been responsible in their job as the operational head and chief in doing a number of things that would now need to be validated post their service. And that is why, sir, I said earlier that this bill also seeks to validate the appointment of those officers and give validity and legitimacy to some of the work they would have done before. Mr. President, the amendments that are proposed to this Defense Act are short. They look at command of the force during certain exigencies of service. They look, sir, at validating, as I just said, and I explained that, and to ensure that we're able to expand the age. The amendment is short. There are very specific amendments, and I believe that I have indeed outlined to this honorable chamber, sir, not just some of the rationale associated with it, but equally some of the specifics of the act that we are seeking now to amend. And it is with these few words that I open the floor to debate, and I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
Thank you, Senator McConney. Senator Franklin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I know I usually say that I book long and then sometimes I slip through, but this is a very short bill and I will treat it with short shift and let me get that over with. So let me start by calling some names. St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Dominica, Grenada, Aruba, Costa Rica, Iceland, Panama. What those countries have in common with 20 others is that they have no armies. We don't need an army. The Barbados Defense Force, to my mind, is an encumbrance that Barbados cannot afford. You see the resources that you pump in the Barbados Defense Force every year. This year is supposed to be $54,568,495, but there will be a supplementary because it surpassed this the last time, and everything going up. next year is estimated to cost $101,483,927. These are resources that can be better spent further equipping the police, giving them the resources that they need, and some of those same Defense Force people can be retrained to be police officers. Not all, because police and soldiers have different roles. A soldier should not leave his barrack on duty unless he is armed. That means he should be only out there when there's an emergency. I see we have had over the years, every year, I can't remember how long, the Governor General is called upon to give her or his assent to the police being used and to the Defense Force being used to assist the police on a continuing basis. That should only be done in aid of the civil power when the police are unable to carry out their function, when there's a breakdown of law and order and the police can't handle everything. But we have desensitized this country to believing that soldiers should be always on the road. And everything you look when you see soldiers out there with the police in the back of the vehicles with guns, when they got camp fire patrols, you have soldiers out there with guns and that can shoot the fire. You know, this whole thing, we've gotten it wrong. The ideal situation would be, if you still want to have some sort of military, but certainly not a full-time force, we had the Barbados Regiment, where all of us were part-time soldiers, and I said us because I was a member. And then I became one of the first people to join the Barbados Defense Force. So I don't have any ill will against the Barbados Defense Force, but I'm just saying, I was a young man and foolish. Some might say that I'm old and foolish, no, but so before you say that, I acknowledge and move on. But I have been able to discern what is happening. And as a young 20-year-old boy, because at 20 you're still a boy, and I was a cadet at school, so the natural thing for me to do is to lean toward the Army. That's one of the few things I knew. You know, and I was damn good at it. You know, down from parades, shooting, you name it, I could do it. As a matter of fact, I once qualified as a first class shot. Hey. Be warned.
We stand on guard.
So, but the Defense Force is a very small unit. And if a company of soldiers, well-equipped soldiers invaded Barbados, we wiped out in half an hour. It is not fit for the purpose that you're saying that it's equipped for. It is not. We don't have any enemies that want to take over Barbados. And certainly our neighbors to the west of us, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Dominica, Grenada, I don't think they can come and invade Barbados, but they don't have armies. Not one of them. Grenada had an army, and that army imploded. It went about 83. And, well, you know, the history is there. Everybody knows what happened on there. General Austin and his band of things executed the Prime Minister. They don't see the need for it now. Costa Rica, since 1949, didn't have an army. Iceland, since 1869, they didn't have an army. And Panama abolished years after the Americans went and take out Noriega, 1990. And we are spending too much money on something that cannot provide the service that we are saying that it can provide. The Barbados Defense Force does not have the capacity to repel 2 good platoons of well-equipped soldiers. Now, if we want to have a defense pact like some of these countries have with the United States or Britain or whatever, remember Britain has the Falkland Islands, and the Falkland Islands haven't got an army either, but the soldiers are there to defend them. I remember I went to Bermuda. Bermuda had the Bermuda Regiment, just similar to what we had in Barbados. But part-time soldiers, just like the reserve, you will be called out if needed. But you trained, we used to train every week, and then 2 another week, and a couple of weeks in the year. Get vacation. I've been to all of that. Used to get, in those days, used to get $2 a parade. And the place was packed. They had a lot of soldiers because it wasn't there for the money. People love soldiering. Me too, I made some very good friends. To this day, some of my best friends are the people that I still associate with are soldiers. You know, there's a kind of camaraderie that you could only get in organizations like armies and scouts and cadets, that kind of thing. You will get nowhere else. But sad to say, we don't need it. It is a burden. It is taking too much money from the Treasury when that money could be better utilized to provide other services that the country needs. If you look at my shoes now, you will see that you can see your face in them. I throw back from the army.
Indecent.
Right? The problem is, that's what you do up there when they come shine your boot. There's nothing for them to do. But we have a whole set of criminals out there, and the police don't have enough manpower to be visible everywhere. Provide some of those resources to the police. Give them some of those big fancy vehicles to go out there so and take out the marijuana until it's still illegal. Give the, and I'm not talking, sir, about getting rid of the Coast Guard, because that is a necessary element. We need the Coast Guard. But you don't need full-time soldiers being fighting with anybody. There is no way a Barbados going to attack anybody. And if you want, and if you are planning a situation where Barbados might have insurrection, as the government is forcing us to do, with that, we'll call it mark of the devil, mark of the beast vaccine, you know, that might cause some rebellion, and that is what you might want to have an army to deal with us, more so than to deal with any external threat. Because the external threats that we may be having could be repelled by the Coast Guard, because they're usually drug people. Or you can have people stranded at sea. Coast Guard again. So you really do not need a full-time army to sit down there and retire. Look, I remember when I joined the Barbados Defense Force, even though the act was passed in 1979, I signed on the dotted line in 1978 because I had to leave the country to start my officer training in Canada. So I was one of the first to join on the dotted line. And I signed to wait till the act was passed. So I have great memories about the Barbados Defense Force, but we have to be realistic. If we can have the police with a special services unit, like I said, some of these countries, who will do some of the military duties, they will train them to do them. And you could probably use some of the same people. You will get rid of a whole lot of these officers that you're talking about now that you have, that you want to retire at 60 and all kind of stuff. Because you wouldn't need them. You would have your commissioner and 2 deputies. Probably if you increase the complement of the force, you could probably have a 3rd who would be responsible for the paramilitary aspect of the police force. But you need a special services unit who will handle that kind of thing. And if then the police still needs assistance, you might have a part-time regiment like we had before that will then assist the police if in a state of emergency. But you are finding out defense force people with nothing to do as soldiers, finding themselves in all aspects of our society when they are not necessary and when they are not trained for it. I hear about the hyperbaric chamber, you're telling me, get the hospital. You know, they didn't have, because of that, they didn't have to have that. The Barbados Defense Force Sports Program Shouldn't have been done in the first place. That was not their role. But they were looking for something to do. These things cost money. Mind you, I am not going to vote against this because we have to regularize the fact that some officers were appointed, at least one officer that I know was appointed chief of staff, and it was beyond the age he should have been. If this is not regularized, he should get a pension. So for that reason, I'm not going to vote. I will abstain. But I'm giving my views. The gentleman was in question is a true national hero of this country. And I would not want to bring him or the work that he has done into any sort of disrepute or even to question it. I have the highest respect for him. I remember years ago when I was a young man, a young fella, I went by Kentucky Fried Chicken in Hastings, and I was there leaning up. I was not yet married and stuff. You know how long ago that was. And I leaned over the counter trying to talk to one of the young ladies there, and he came in. Boy, I did like that. I straightened up, And when I caught myself, I said, "Geez, this man still got me jumping." You know what I mean? So he has the highest respect that I can give to anybody. So I wouldn't want for him to lose his pension as a result. So I'm not going to vote for the bill and extending the age and stuff, but I would want this section that his age to be validated, or to say that all acts that he did and his service will be regularized and stuff. I have no difficulty with that. I don't think he will mind me calling his name, sir, because I'm not criticizing him in any way. This man should be, should be a model for young people. When I went to school at Combermere, he was responsible for the scouts, he was responsible for the cadets, he taught me English, he taught me a couple of other things, and he was responsible for hockey. He did everything up there. I remember one day a friend of mine got into trouble, and he was taken to the headmaster, and the headmaster told him, "If you don't behave yourself, I'm going to call Mr. Mayor and let him know you're behaving." The head teacher telling one of us that he's going to complain to this gentleman for us if we don't behave. That's the measure of demand that we have. So please fix that. But you don't have to fix it by bringing in some other people and trying to shape the force into something that it should not be. Because I'll tell you, soldiers should be young, fit men. No old fellas in 65 and 9 who are going around the place, because if you have to go on your military duties, one, you're not going to keep up with your troops. Because the fellas are going to left you with the, especially with your arthritic knee. So that is why soldiers get their pension at age 45 if they have served 15 years. 45. What's the reason for that? So don't rush in here and think that, because everybody else, every clerical officer, every maid, and everybody goes off at 67, that you do it to the Defense Force too. Look, in St. Lucia, my other home, police go home at 55. If you are below the ranks, the command ranks and stuff, you could go home at 55. There's a reason for that. You could see a 60-year-old fella running behind a crook and telling you, stop, this is the law. I come in, if I'm going to left you. So you've got to recognize that there's some jobs that you can't do beyond a certain age. Soldiering is one of those. You don't need to have old men let them sit in the offices mess and have a little claret and port and that kind of stuff. That's what they do. I met one of them, the colonel of the regiment, so he can go and take the salutes at parade. But you don't need people at that age with all the attendant illnesses that you will have coming up. I remember as a youngster, the first time I went to the doctor, I was 20. And And then thereafter, I reached a certain point, you know, it was like, no doctor, and then I was seeing the doctor every week. As age caught up with me, I had to change, so I don't see him every week now. But that is repeated for soldiers. They're not fit normally to be a soldier at 65. Any old soldier is usually in the Legion, not regular force. But this is a political decision rather than a military requirement. You know? Talking about, look, one of the places that do the most training in the world is the Army. And you are turning out so many people who can be defense. You got so many people in there that can be the chief of staff right now. But you're looking for a particular man. Your man. So that is why this is here. This nonsense has to stop. We cannot make over Barbados, the image of the Barbados Labour Party, or the people in the Barbados Labour Party want what they want. We have to be sensible and do things for the best of this country and not for the best of any particular individual who thinks that I need to have the Army under my control, so I'm going to have my loyal people to it. So I won't have any issues. There's not going to be any issues if you govern properly. So don't try to keep the soldiers as your private army, because they're not there to defend against any external aggression. We don't have any. Not since they had these sailing ships. They used to come here and bomb the ports, you know. And the last time anybody fired any shots down here, so from any ship was the Cornwallis. When the Cornwallis got struck, the time he got struck from behind, and it sank. That was the last time. Nobody needs to have an army of soldiers who will look pretty, dress up nicely, and that is all. And you have to find things for them to do. Look, put something in the fire service. Fire service, they will be there. They can they're trainable. Train them. Put something in the police force. They are trainable. Re-educate them, because soldiers are taught to kill. I know how to kill. I haven't tried it, thankfully, or yet, but I know how, because I was taught that. So if you want to make them policemen, you have to retrain them. That is all you need. Increase the ranks of the police force. Right now, the police need a lot of people, can't get them. And you got people there sitting down, when the day comes, shining boots and looking for things to do. And spending $54 million estimated this year, $54.568 million. For what? Kuduma walked on the road alongside the bands? That's not soldiering. That's not the role of a soldier. Go on campfire patrols? Not the role of a soldier. Soldiers in my training that I got at St. Anne's Fort tells me soldiers should be out in aid of the civil power. Civil power, police. And when the police can't handle the situation, that's when the government generally declares an emergency, and you, right now you have soldiers out. You have a state of emergency, and they're not doing military duties, they're doing civilian duties. Okay. Now let me touch on one other thing. Since you are correcting errors, there's an error that I would love to see the government correct in relation to the Barbados Defense Force. When the Barbados Defense Force came into being and the Defense Act and regulations were put in place, they made no provision for pensions for the soldiers. So some people served their time and retired. and didn't get the pension. When Arthur, God bless him and keep rest him in his grave, he came up with a solution that gave the soldiers who should have gotten their pensions and for future people to get their pensions. And they backdated that legislation to accommodate people all the way back to 1978. But there's a particular pension that is provided for in the books. It is if you are injured, you will get your pension early. Well, I know of 3 people who have been fighting for years. One got injured in the Defense Force ambulance turnover. Another one, a truck turnover and injured him. He probably barely able to do anything for himself. And they, to this day, they have not gotten their pensions. Everybody else was backdated but them. Why them? They didn't cause it upon themselves. They were not even in charge of the vehicles. They weren't driving the vehicles when they got injured. And they're suffering. Fix that error too. I have been trying to assist them for years. We've spoken to the Permanent Secretary, Defense and Security. We've written to the Pensions Committee. We've written to the Defense Board. And everybody ignored us, man. But everybody else got a pension but them. Fix that. They were disabled in the course of their duties, dismissed from the Defense Force because they could no longer be soldiers, and put to pasture like an old horse that can no longer answer the call to die. They need to fix that as well. Mr. President, I know, sir, will tell you again, I'm in support of the aspects to fix the mistakes you made in terms of the officer who was appointed after he should have been retired. But I'll tell you something, with that particular person, the country got good service nonetheless. I'm prepared to support that aspect of it, but nothing else. Right now, we don't need it. And I, for one, even though I love soldiers and love soldiering, and I thought that's what it would ever be, it does not make sense to have an army to do nothing. Because, when you train men to kill and don't give them a target, eventually to turn inwards. I hope that doesn't happen, sir. And I will thank you, sir, for your indulgence.
Thank you very much, Senator Franklin. Senator Liggins.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to everyone. Sometimes it becomes necessary for organizations to reset, and this is not necessarily an indication of failure, but sometimes to ensure continuity with the organization. As I understand it, Mr. President, the Defense Force Amendment Bill, Cap 159, seeks to do certain things, and they were outlined essentially by Senator McConney, so I don't really have to go over them, but essentially to make persons who are over the age of 55 and who have not reached the age of 65 years to command the Barbados Defense Force, and to validate a period that Senator Franklin spoke about of an individual who was 59 years old at the time and who was appointed to the post of Chief of Staff, and to also extend the period of service of the reserves in the Barbados Defense Force to age 65 rather than age 60. Mr. President, sometimes you don't understand. Well, he said he served in the Barbados Defense Force, so he knows a lot more about it than I would. But I remember I have a brother who also served in the Defense Force, and I was like, he retired very early. And he retired early, and he learned skills in the Defense Force that allowed him to go on to another job. And those skills were obviously earned from all the training that is given in the Army. So those of us who grew up in the 60s and 70s knew about the role of the Defense Force, or the Barbados Regiment as it then was. But in 1979, the Barbados Regiment was effectively abolished, and there came the enactment of the Barbados Defense Act. Senator McConney also outlined the structure of the Defense Force, which is the regiment, the Coast Guard, and the Cadet Corps. And the regiment and the Coast Guard comprise of full-time and reserve officers, and the Cadet Corps is commanded solely by officers who served in the reserve. Mr. President, because many of these soldiers would have retired early, there were many gaps to be filled, and some of them were left in the Army, as we like to call it. And that old guard served a lot of useful, and is still serving a lot of useful purposes to the country Barbados. A lot of them served with joint patrols with the Royal Barbados Police Force, whether it will be to crop over, to fires, and in natural disasters. They also assist the Barbados Water Authority and the Ministry of Health in carrying out a lot of the duties that we want to see. And I want to expand a whole lot on what the role they carried out with the Ministry of Health, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. President, I know that they set up the field hospital because I actually visited the field hospital that was set up by the Barbados Defense Force. And as you know, the Barbados Defense Force transported and are still transporting patients who are COVID positive and otherwise to the various isolation facilities. They also assisted when we had the incident there with care packages for persons who were unemployed, and the Army was assigned to do a lot of that work. And Mr. President, I want to say something. Currently, the Joint Coordinator of the Defense Force, Major David Clark, is a commander. Major David Clark is also a member of the Defense Force. And I can tell you, I was very, very personally pleased when the Prime Minister appointed Major Clark as Joint Coordinator of the National Vaccination Program. And I say that, and I'm happy that I can stand up and say that today, because I knew him while serving in the United Kingdom. And he served with the royal household. And Major Clark, I can tell you, he is a very established person, a very organized person, and he organizes things to a very fine detail. And I can tell you that because I know that personally, and all of us who serve abroad know that personally. And I am very, very happy to say that publicly in here today, to see Major Clark playing such an outstanding role for his country, Barbados. And of course, we have the soldiers who also are involved when we have mass casualty situations, and the whole question of the hyperbaric treatment that is given by the Defense Force, and hurricanes and so on that they are involved in terms of mobilization of people and resources. So the Barbados Defense Force and the soldiers, they serve Barbados very, very well. My research also tells me that they're involved in the training of public servants, and they train a lot of public servants in computer classes. So I think that if a lot of Barbadians even look in watching CNN and see the role and the soldiers play from in every single aspect of life, they would understand that in order, because you just said, Senator Franklin just said, Mr. President, that when he was in a fast food operation, he was interfering with the girl, and the major and the chief of staff came in, and right away he stood up and fly right. So it shows you the respect.
Just for clarity, Senator Wiggins,
Yes, sir.
conservative language, interfering is a wonderful Barbadian colloquial word, but usually when used juxtaposed to girl, it can be mistaken for that which would tend to be referenced in the law courts. And Senator Franklin said he was, I believe he was speaking with the girl. So I would suggest you rephrase that. At least the record suggests that his commanding officer had to save the girl. Which was not the
Thank you for
intention.
your guidance, Mr. President. His commanding officer had to save the young lady.
No. I'm saying, for clarity, I've said he said before her friend said he was not interfering with the girl. Said the friend was having a conversation, and then he saw his commanding officer. Even though he was on good ground, he was being charming. He sprung to attention based on his training, but there was nothing untoward or any intention of interfering with the young lady. So he was having a conversation with the young lady.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your guidance. We also know in terms of the Barbados Defense Force, the Coast Guard section, they provide maritime training for private and regional institutions. And that Coast Guard training facility is a world-class, excellent facility. I'm sure Senator Franklin will also confirm this. The Barbados Defense Force also assists the government in terms of firearms training. And my understanding is that they train the persons at the ports of entry to recognize firearms, especially when they come in the various parts. And they're there to train the many officers there who are tracking to see when these firearms come in. Also, Mr. President, as you would know, a number of these soldiers, because of their high level of training, they are trusted from a very young age into the diplomatic field. And a lot of, I think up to today, we have about 7 persons who would serve as the attaché, especially in our Washington office. So soldiers are very, very multi-talented, and they do serve Barbados very well. As a matter of fact, in 2019, a commander in the Defense Force is now serving as our head of mission in our Venezuela embassy. So these soldiers are so well trained, Mr. President, they can be in the twinkling of an eye, be assigned to any position, whether it be diplomatic, whether it be medical. And I'm sure they also serve as head of some of our regional organizations. You have a lieutenant colonel who serves as the head of CARICOM Impacts, and a naval captain who heads the regional security system. So that shows you the true nature of the Barbados Defense Force and the levels of which these soldiers, Mr. President, can be assigned. So I would say I definitely support this bill because it seeks to maintain the high standard in the Barbados Defense Force, and it also continues to let persons who are of a certain age, they don't have to retire now, they can continue to serve, and at least some of them until the age of 65. So, Mr. President, these are my few words, and I am obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Wiggins. Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to make a short contribution to this debate of the Defense Amendment Act 2021 from the perspective of my perspective as a practitioner of labor relations. I take note of many of the ideas expressed by Senator Franklin, who's had personal experience with the Barbados Defense Force, and his reflections which fuel his contribution. In labor relations, my experience has been that some people fight to get things that other people fight to get rid of. Right? So, as we consider changing a state of affairs relative to the Barbados Defense Force, that state of affairs being a relatively early retirement age, and we are making provision for officers who qualified according to the legislation to continue to give service beyond the stipulated age, the now stipulated age. In considering this fact, it was not lost on me that there are members of the Royal Barbados Police Force who, in discussions with them, with a large number of them over the years, they've expressed a wish to have just this ability, because I don't think it can be lost on anybody that certain jobs that require a certain amount of physical rigor will have a toll on the body, and a person's capacity to perform at an optimal level will diminish as they advance in years. When I look, though, at the contribution that the Barbados Defense Force has made to Barbados, now, my fellow senators who have spoken before me have all referred to what may be considered the primary purpose, that related to defense of Barbados. But reference is also made to the contribution that the Barbados Defense Force makes in providing leadership and guidance to young Barbados through its youth arm, if I may call it that, the Barbados Cadet Corps. And when I think of the makeup of our parliament, both houses of our parliament, I can identify, I'm not certain if Senator Franklin was a member of the number 3 company.
Very much so, sir.
Very much so. Okay. His confirmation now allows me to say that I can identify now at least 3 members of both houses of parliament combined who have come from the number 3 company or the Barbados Cadet Corps. And if that doesn't speak to the building of leadership capacity, I challenge anybody to tell me what does. I'm getting support from someone who could have been a member of the number 3 company. So, I think that there's value in doing what the government is clearly minded to do with respect to this bill. I am of the view that a government should be the exemplar employer in the country. And in that regard, there's more value than what may immediately appear to be being considered in this legislation. I am considering the value of a message being sent, or a message that can be adduced from the steps the government is taking with respect to this bill, as far as creating an ethos in the country where we do not just discard employees because they have reached some particular age. So that when we look at the state of affairs as we find them today, the Defense Force has what is a default retirement age. In Barbados, beyond the Barbados Defense Force, even in the private sector, there's the operation of what is, in effect, a default retirement age, 65. Even though we have had amendments of the national insurance legislation that has changed the pensionable age, steps have not been taken in a manner that have been sweeping enough to address the gap created between employment policies of a lot of employers, of too many employers in Barbados, in fact, and what employees are entitled to as far as their pension rates under the National Insurance Act. So we have a situation where not only are employees, if they want to get the maximum benefit from their national insurance pension, not only do they have to wait until they reach age 67 to do so, but they're doing that in a context where employers are telling them when they reach the age of 65, they're being retired, they have to go. And the reality is that should they go and assess their pension benefits, there are penalties which add up. Right? So I'm hoping that the value, beyond the immediate value to those qualifying by virtue of their membership of the Barbados Defense Force, the value from this bill being passed is that the message that can reasonably be taken from it across the employment landscape in Barbados is that we need to stop putting employees out to pasture just because they reach a particular age. This concept of a default retirement age needs to be properly examined and discussed, perhaps at another time. But I am happy, sir, to support the bill for those reasons that I have mentioned, and I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Hunt. Senator Nurse.
Thank you, Mr. President. I must confess my ignorance about the terms and conditions of service of our military people. I didn't realize that their retirement age was actually the age that we had heard earlier. And when I thought about it, I really was wondering, Mr. President, why is it that our military people would have been required to retire at this early age? And I thought maybe, a lot of our legislation is patterned on, the Canadian and the British or whatever, and that may have been the general trend or general thing where military people retire at this early age. So I thought about it, and I figured, well, maybe there's a good reason for that. And it seems to me that in countries like the UK, the US, for example, where the military is actually out on the battlefield. They actually engage in various wars and so on. You know, there's always tension throughout the world, and they are moving to these various places. Then perhaps I could understand why it may have a significant stress on those military people. In fact, while I was sitting here, I actually Googled in something, and I noticed some information, and I was noticing, for example, that there are ongoing studies which suggest, for example, that military people seem to suffer from, while the studies are ongoing, but the initial indications are that they tend to suffer from premature aging, for example, due to the levels of stress and high risk which they undergo in the battlefield. And I mean, and of course, we now know a lot of what we hear about the post-traumatic stress disorder, which a lot of them suffer because of the long periods in places like Afghanistan, and you know, in Vietnam and so on. So it seems to make sense that because of this premature age and because of the physical and psychological impact which these wars can have, that it would really be necessary for them to have a bit of an earlier retirement than people working in, let's say, a normal civil service situation. But the fact is, of course, Mr. President, in the Barbados situation, our military really, you probably serve your entire working life without ever having to go to a war. I hardly think we will see our Barbados Defense Force having to go out and undertake that kind of activity. I mean, and I can only remember, certainly in my lifetime, one issue which was, and I think Senator Franklin may have mentioned that, where there may have been done some little, maybe some little involvement in the Grenada invasion or intervention or whatever you may call it, where they were merely and really and truly they were more providing support service to the Americans army that were there. So the point I'm making is that our military is not involved in that high stress, high risk situations. Yes, they have been called upon to do a lot of what you may suppose, I suppose, is community type services. They have been throughout the Caribbean, assisting when there were hurricanes. We know as recently as 2-3 years ago being into Dominica, we've had situations in Antigua when there was the earthquake situation in Haiti some years ago. They went in and provided assistance. So it is that kind of work or duties, you should say, or service that really our military people in Barbados have been involved in. And even recently, we have seen them within the past year, because of the advent of COVID, we've seen them out doing a lot of things. They were heavily involved initially in distributing the care packages and various other aspects of assisting during the COVID, and even now as continue to fight COVID. We have also seen that they were busy as recently as in March or April when we had the sulfur eruption, and they also assisted in helping to get us back into a state of normalcy after the ash falls here. So they've been doing a lot of that service. It is important to have that kind of assistance, and I really think that they need to be strongly commended for the work they've been doing in these areas. So that brings me then to the point, Mr. President, that if they're not under these stressful and high-stress situations that I mentioned earlier of other military countries, then perhaps it means that they can serve a little bit longer. And so I have no difficulty in agreeing to this amendment that the retirement age could be extended. We have one of the smallest armies in the world. We have in the military some of those military officers who have gained over the time a tremendous amount of training and expertise in the areas of securities. They've been trained at the world-class academies like Sandhurst and West Point and some of these other academies around the world. And therefore, that knowledge and so on can be of use to us. And therefore, I feel to allow them to be able to extend their retirement age to the age that is currently being proposed is to give us an opportunity to be able to utilize that pool of experience. We've seen them, as Senator Franklin, I think, mentioned, we've seen them being utilized, for example, in joint patrols with the police force. We've seen the military being used to assist in other areas, and therefore, and even now, I see one of our top military officers, for example, is one of the coordinators of our national vaccine service. So, Mr. President, I have no difficulty with this amendment. I think Barbados, in general, can benefit from the knowledge that these individuals would have accumulated over the years. And I readily support the amendment, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Nurse. Senator Greenwich.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Sir, I begin this short address by making reference to something which happened to me not so long ago, because I don't want you to put a number to date me. Not so long ago. I was, on that day, 65 years of age. That's 15 years ago. And I had taken up the phone to call someone I had taught at school overseas. And I never knew that person, that she would have made me virtually lecture on a statement which I had used to her, a statement by Thomas Hobbes, a legal philosopher who actually gave the world a saying that the life of man is nasty, brutish, and short. What had happened is that she herself was 56, and we had the same birth date, not day. She was, and we usually call each other on birthdays. And she was saying, but we are almost the same age now. You're 65, mine is just turned around 56. That's why I remember it so well. And I said, after a few exchanges, I said, so how is work? And she said, work? But sir, don't you, well, she called me sir still because I used to teach her. But sir, you don't realize that I am already retired? I mean, when she said that to me, she said she had retired a year ago at 55. The phone nearly dropped out of my hand. Because it seemed to me like only months ago, just a few years down the road, I was teaching this same young lady in a classroom. She said, yes, my working life is already over. 55 years of age. And all I do now is to bake some cakes at home. She says it doesn't even feel to me as though I'm still working. Yes, I sell cakes and so on, but it feels like a hobby. But my working life is over. And when she said that is when I reflected with her on what Thomas Hobbes had said, that life is nasty, brutish, but especially short. 55 years and your working life is gone. I think, sir, that 55, to this day, believe it, I don't even like the number 55. I think, sir, that it is much too young an age for retirement. Much too young. She'd gone on to tell me, too, that this was the case not only in that particular English dependency, but in other territories in the Caribbean as well. And she went on to say that occasionally they have been asked to stay on, but they have to do so on an annual contract with the government. I heard a little almost crying in her voice when she tried to explain to me that at 55 she thinks that she was in the prime of her life, that she was quite healthy, that she was still very active. I have to admit, though, that since then, a couple of years after, the law was passed in quite a few of those territories that the age of retirement in the government is now 60. So it has been improved, and that they had to fight virtually tooth and nail to get it reduced, increased to 60. And when I saw this particular piece of legislation coming for amendment, and I realized that that top retirement age was 55, it really and truly set me thinking once again. Sir, I do not pretend to know a lot about the pecking order within the Defense Force. What I do know, sir, is that the colonel is at the top. Then there's the lieutenant colonel. Then there's the major. Lieutenant. Well, they call it lieutenant, lieutenant. Then there's the captain. And you come right away down until you reach the various types of reserves. And right at the bottom too, sir, would be the reserves, the ones who have their own jobs, for instance. And they're just, you could almost say, partially attached to the Defense Force. They have their normal jobs. Suffice it to say, Mr. President, that the Defense Force is a rank-based, military-type organization, and that there's an obvious change of command and pecking order within the Defense Force. Presently, the colonel, his retirement age would be 55. The lieutenant, can't say lieutenant anymore, colonel, would be 50. The major would be 47. The captain and lower, captain and lower would be 45. But that is those would be the retirement ages within the force. I could not agree with Senator Nurse more, Mr. President. Retiring at ages 45, 50, and 55 might have been ideal for those soldiers serving in the British Army. These were soldiers, sir, who were constantly at war, who were constantly fighting one enemy or the other. Soldiers, sir, whose lives were always in constant danger. Sir, some of them went to war. Some of them returned with one leg, with one arm. Some of them saw mutilated bodies on the ground. Some of them saw fellow soldiers lose their head right beside them. Sir, a lot of them came back from the war shell-shocked. There was constant stress in the army. There was constant movement in the British Army, sir. You were dispatched to all quarters of the world. What those soldiers encountered in 15 years in the army, they encountered, sir, what most other people would not encounter in a lifetime. And sir, as I said, I've looked carefully at that age of 55. I've looked at that cutoff mark at the top where the colonel is. And as I said, that is what set me thinking once again about this age of 55. I believe, Mr. President, that these ages, 45, 55 in particular, were based on what went on in the British Army. Our Defense Force is totally different. we are not involved in active combat. Senator McConney, Senator Nurse, Senator Wiggins, Senator Franklin too, have already mentioned what our defense force is called upon to do. And I do believe, sir, that when Barbados became independent, a lot of these things which we would have inherited from England, we should have been looking at them every day and taken a different approach. And that would have happened, obviously, to what is happening with the ages and so on in the defense force. My personal view on it is that whether you are a lieutenant colonel, whether you're a captain, whether you're reserve, that you should be able to work in the defense force until you reach that age of 65. I've always felt that way. And if you want to opt for an earlier retirement, then that would be totally up to you. But I do not think, sir, that it is fair that you should be asked to retire at an age such as 50 or 55. There has been a hint already this morning that our defense force is really no different to the police force. And therefore I would ask this question. Suppose that we had imposed these retirement strictures within the police force. What would have happened? What would have happened? Indeed, as I speak, sir, I know of a family in St. Philip where there are 3 brothers. The oldest one, he is in the police force. The youngest one is in the defense force. And while the oldest one is there continuing to work, the young one has to retire in another couple of days. And so I would ask the question once again, suppose that rule had to apply throughout the police force, what would happen? Or what would have been the attitude? I wouldn't mind if we go the next step and simply say all members of the defense force can now go on to 65. And I'm sure, sir, that if you had to consult with those in the defense force, that they would all say, the majority of them should say, that it is okay with them. That you should put all of them on the same wavelength. Because right now what is happening, you have some of them on AM, some of them on FM, and some on shortwave. I do not think any of them would say, I don't know if Senator Rogers knows this calypso, but Sparrow had a song say, we like it so. We like it. And I'm sure that the people in the defense force wouldn't say that. I saw that in the newspaper only yesterday, where a past defense force member was saying he is really happy to see this legislation come to pass. And so, sir, it doesn't surprise us that there is a common practice in the defense force for soldiers to ask for permission to stay on past their retirement age. And there's a variety of reasons for it. I would go into them, but you know that some of them really and truly think that, it's going to be so much hardship on them if they're forced to retire at such a young age. More often than not, I understand that the permission is granted for them to stay on. The discretion is exercised in their favor, and they are kept on. But as Senator McConney said this morning, maybe she didn't put it in those words, but that discretion does not change the law. The law still remains intact. You should still retire at what the law says, 45, 50, or 55. So technically and legally speaking, if the colonel is allowed to stay on, chief of staff, and he issues an order, whether he issues the order to take the boat to St. Vincent, or whether he sits on a committee and dismisses a soldier, or whether he signs contract because of the defense force, so on behalf of the defense force, he is doing something which he is not legally supposed to do once he has passed that particular age. And in order to address this, then we have to make wrong things right. And nothing short of legislation, nothing short of a legal validation is going to achieve this. It will cure past errors. That is what the validation does. It cures vast errors. But, sir, it will not give you any future insurance or any future green light for future errors. It cures the past. It makes valid what was invalid. And therefore, the amendment here, which says that the continuance in office is Section 3 of any officer or soldier of the Barbados Defense Force, or the appointment of such an officer or soldier to any office before the commencement of this new act, says that that now shall be deemed to have been lawful and valid. And any function performed by such an officer or soldier before the commencement of this act shall be deemed to have been lawfully and validly performed. Quite clear in the legislation. The whole question of the validity. So I listened to Senator Franklin, and I heard, he spoke almost like a spurned lover. I've been spurned many times. He was a member of the Defense Force. He's not now a member of the Defense Force. I didn't challenge him. I didn't ask him. I know he went on a course, he said it, to Canada to be trained. I didn't ask him if he finished it. I know the answer, though. I know the answer. I didn't ask him if he finished the course. I know the answer. And he says that he accuses government of politicizing and keeping soldiers. They want to keep soldiers as a private army. Sir, these things, sometimes they're said whimsically, but they can do a lot of damage. And they can make people perceive that there is something going on which is underhand and so forth. This has no politics whatsoever in it. None whatsoever. But, as I said, sir, sometimes we are not allowed to do as we like in certain organizations, and sometimes we make statements which have no substance in them whatsoever. Mr. President, training of soldiers, I agree, is an extremely expensive undertaking, no matter where you send them to train. It is expensive. And just imagine the Barbados government spending thousands and thousands of dollars for one of our defense officers to be trained at somewhere, as Senator Nurse said, like Sandhurst, at the age of 45. And then 5 years afterwards, he reaches retirement age. And all the training that he has got, he goes home and he carries all that training with him. 18. And the country would not have benefited significantly from the money spent on him. I agree with all that. And it shouldn't surprise us to learn that early retirement, once that approaches, and the officers see that age in the short distance, that many of our leading officers, sir, begin to look for greener pastures. It is too early to retire someone at 50 or 55. As I said, they are in the prime of their life. Our Minister of Health is perhaps the most active Minister of Health ever. He is something of an I said Minister of Health. He is an energizer bunny. He is as fit as a fiddle. And similarly, sir, our Superintendent of Prisons, the Chief Staff there, is also one full of energy. So in a way, what the Defense Force lost was another department's gain. The training benefited somewhere else. Mr. President, I think I have said enough to make it known that I fully support this amendment, and I urge members of the Senate, this honorable chamber, to do likewise. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Greenwich. Senator Grant.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't intend to be too long. I must confess, sir, that maybe I was in a different space because I was looking at the time and I was thinking of lunch. So I didn't expect that I would hear you calling on me to speak at this time, but be that as it may.
We're soldiering on.
Yes, very much so. Very much so, sir. When called upon to speak, I will always speak. And hopefully I will be making a meaningful and good contribution. I'm in full support, Mr. President, of this bill before this honorable chamber. And I do have to say that when I heard the contribution from Senator Franklin, it made me remember a calypso, I believe it was in 1983, a calypso by the mighty Gabby, a calypso called Boots. Boots, 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 and more boots. Of course, sir, I remember well what that song was about, essentially about the Defense Force, and really asking the question if the Defense Force was relevant. That was, sir, in 1983. Today is 2021. Today, July 2021. And I believe, and I certainly, sir, will put the position that the Barbados Defense Force has demonstrated a relevance that is important and has shown over those years that it was and has been and continues to be a very useful institution. I agree, sir, and I have absolutely no expectation that the Barbados Defense Force will be required to engage in activity to stop some foreign force invading Barbados, that they will be carrying out that kind of national security component to protect country and to protect citizens. But I think we will all agree that the armed forces, the Barbados Defense Force, provides more support than just simply that of protecting against some foreign invasion. There was a time, sir, I remember, and I am not dating myself, although I'm going to say in this debate exactly how old I am. I'm not afraid to say that. I will say exactly how old I am. But I remember a time, sir, when I used to hear, because I've been, I guess, around politics for a little while, and I always had an interest in politics. And I remember there used to be talk about this man, a Barbadian man, and sir, I will not call his name. I haven't asked your permission, so I will not violate the rules. About this Barbadian man who said that he was coming back to Barbados and he would invade Barbados and he can come back even on a dolphin. I remember the name well. The name is to the top of my mind. And this man was involved in arms dealership or something of that nature. I remember him well. I remember the talk about it well, sir. And those who are of my age, and certainly older, maybe just a little younger, will remember what I am speaking about. But it's a long time, sir. I have not heard anything like that for so long. So I don't have any expectation that there will be some army or some set of people trying to invade Barbados. But I do think, Mr. President, that there are some critical elements and some critical services provided by the Barbados Defense Force. And so I want to speak briefly to some of those. Sir, I have never been in the reserves. I've never been in the Defense Force, nothing so. I was a member of the cadets. In fact, sir, you can still hear my voice. In my head, sir, you can still hear the commanding officer, the sergeant major, sir, saying, "Number 2 company, get on parade." I was part of the number 2 company, sir, at the Lodge School. I remember it well. The last 2 periods on Fridays. And you put on your uniform and thing, and you march and you did some other things. And I start there for this reason, sir. When I was at the Lodge School, there was a little bit of naughtiness in me. Of course, sir, you will ask yourself, the Rudy Grant that you see now. How is that possible? This Rudy Grant, who is so calm and cool and easy, very Christian-like, very much like Reverend Rogers, who is also a student of the Lord's School, by the way. But there was in that youngster, you know, a fellow who coming up in a tough environment, where, you know, you would get regularly, fellas would be slapping you around your head. It was tough at the Lord's School. And I remember one day, and I'm going to just relate to you something that occurred. I remember one day we were marching, and the headmaster of the day, we used to call him Joe, CEA Aurelius Smith. I remember he passed, and there was one guy who was upset, and he asked, what is happening? And the guy said, "Sir, I don't like what this officer is asking me to do and making me run laps all the time." And I would never forget what Headmaster Smith said. He said, "Lad," because he always referred to us as lad. He said, "Lad, this is your commanding officer. And if he commands you to march through the canes, you will march through the canes." And I reference that, sir, because there was a certain level of discipline provided in the cadets. And I'm also cognizant that that is provided by the Barbados Defense Force. And I reference that because I think that there's a lot that our younger people can learn and recognize from institutions such as the Barbados Defense Force. And I think that we should do whatever is required to continue to have an institution where persons can look and see and observe that you have to be disciplined and that you have to function in a particular manner. Because very often we hear people talk about the responsibilities of the younger generation, and the younger generation not meeting those responsibilities which they have. But we have, sir, to lead by example, and I believe that the Barbados Defense Force provides a good example. I have seen, sir, young men in communities go into the BDF, fellas who you would consider to be bad boys and tough, and go into the BDF and have been humbled into good and proper young men. And I believe, Mr. President, that that is an element that is extremely important. So the discipline component, I think, is critical, and that it is clearly demonstrated that the Barbados Defense Force has been able to contribute in a significant way to that. I think, sir, that the sports program has been very positive as well. And that sports program has not been positive for the older people. I must tell you, sir, that at the age of 56, I get a little ailment here and a little ailment there. And therefore, some of the things I did when I was in my 20s, I'm not now doing in my 50s, although I have to tell you this, sir, that, and I'll speak about it a little later. I must tell you, sir, that I do believe that at 56 years old, there are some things I'm doing far better than when I was in my 20s. But I will come to that a little later.
I'm happy to hear, Senator Grant.
Yes, thank you, sir. When I speak to the issue of the extension of the years. But sports too, sir, helps to instill discipline, and it helps to give purpose. And the Barbados Defense Force program, I think, has been very positive for the young persons. Sir, those who have spoken before have made reference to the humanitarian element. And that is extremely important. I would have been speaking to an officer who indicated to me that he was one of the first people to go to Dominica after the issues that they had in Dominica. We do know that there are persons from the BDF who would have gone, for example, to assist in Grenada. I heard Senator Franklin making reference to Grenada and the revolution there, making reference to the, I believe it's the People's Revolutionary Army in Grenada and the New Jewel movement that existed at the time. And as we all know from history, there was the invasion by the US, and then they had to have a stabilizing force. And members of the Barbados Defense Force would have gone and have assisted in that exercise. There are many other instances as well where members of the Defense Force have assisted for humanitarian purposes, whether it relates to some flood occurring someplace, whether it relates to hurricane. So the humanitarian element is also extremely important. Sir, I also want to touch very, very briefly on the issue of skills for life. Training that persons get in the BDF. And I believe it was Senator Wiggins who earlier made reference to that. You know, sir, growing up, studying, some of the things I studied, I asked myself, why am I studying these things? I remember, sir, studying Julius Caesar. Asked myself, why am I studying Julius Caesar? I remember at 1C1, Hank so ye idle creatures, be this a holiday. I remember it, well, why? But now later on in life, sir, all of those areas in which I have studied and in which I have been exposed and in which I have learned things, I'm able to bring those into practice in one way or the other. There was a time, sir, that I was vice president of a group of companies. And one of the things I did was to allow persons, no matter what they were studying, whether it was related to what was happening at work or not, I allowed persons, sir, to go and pursue what they wanted to pursue because I felt that learning created a better individual. And therefore, the skills that individuals learn and the training that they have in the Barbados Defense Force is able to last them for a lifetime. And I think, Mr. President, that is extremely important. I could not leave this aspect of my presentation without making reference to safety and security. And again, reference has been made by quite a number of persons in relation to the joint patrols that take place between the Royal Barbados Police Force and the Defense Force. So I'm going to tell you about an experience that I had. I went into a community. I will not name the community, but I went into a community years ago, a few years ago, maybe 5-6 years ago, a few years ago. And I was canvassing. And, well, in fact, I got to the canvas a little late. And I then had to meet up with the group that I was canvassing with. In this community, there were a number of fellows with bikes, with scrambler bikes. There were some beat cops in the area, right, walking around, and the fellows with the scramblers, taking the scramblers and passing the policeman, and passing the police, and showing absolutely no respect for those police officers. Within a few minutes, a vehicle turned up, and the vehicle had members of the police force and the defense force. Man, sir, you should have seen the fellas scramble. You should see the fellas scrambling. The scrambling, man. And sir, I reference that because there is a level of deviant behavior that exists in our society with some individuals that really don't have much respect for the regular officer in uniform. But when they see members of either the task force or the police with the defense force, sir, they don't make any sport. They don't play around. They don't take any chances. They recognize very clearly that if they fail to comply or if they test, that they will also receive some measure of response that is able to let them know, don't play around. And therefore, it is my submission that the Barbados Defense Force has played a significant role in assisting with respect to safety and security. So I want to spend just a few minutes speaking to the issue of the age extension. And I agree totally with Senator Senator Greenidge. Totally with Senator Greenidge in relation to maybe having the age extended to everyone. Sir, at 56 years, I believe that I still have a significant contribution to make. I feel so. I believe so. I believe that others of my age as well. And if I was asked to retire at 56, I'm sure, sir, that I would find things to properly occupy my mind. But if we look at the capacity that I presently function in my area, CEO of the BHD, working with tourism, I believe, sir, that I still have a lot to contribute there. And therefore, why would we want to deny individuals the opportunity still to contribute? Let us also, sir, recognize that Barbados is a country where we have limited resources. In fact, we often say that the greatest resource which we have is our people, our human resource. And therefore, in order to ensure that we continue to produce and perform at an international level, what we need to do, sir, is to properly harness all of the resources which we have available to us. Sir, when I was a little boy, and I often speak about when I was a little boy because, it is important, I think, to contrast life when you were young and life now you are older. When I was a little boy, about 5 years, 6 years, 7 years old, a man 55 and a man 60 years old was an old man. For some reason, they appeared to be old people, getting ready, sir, to go to the great beyond. And many persons will say at that age, those persons were in their departure lounge. Sir, that is not the case now. I look, sir, in fact, I have seen people retire at 65 and they still look young and they still look good and they're still healthy. And I guess, sir, that reflects the fact that our healthcare system really is significant and has contributed significantly to the well-being of persons. The fact that we are maybe exercising more and eating in some instances some of the right things, not in all instances, because the truth is that I do believe that in those days the foods that we ate, that those foods certainly were a lot better than what we are eating now. In those days, I have to tell you, sir, I didn't know much about any macaroni pie or a lot of fried chicken and chips. We had some good, sir, pop. I remember some pop, sir. Eating some good bakes, getting some yams and eddies and potatoes. Good food. And I see, sir, Senator Sands looking at me, who is of a younger generation. I'm not going to say, sir, of the Kentucky generation, because I don't want to be unfair to him. But Kentucky, sir, was a treat. Right? But the point that I'm making, to go back to what I was originally saying, is that a person in today's Barbados, 55 years old, is still a young person and still has quite a bit more to give. And I think that it is important that this opportunity is facilitated for a person at the level of the Chief of Staff to be able to contribute to age 60. The fact, sir, that a number of persons in the Defense Force asked for an extension to be able to continue to function in their capacity within the BDF says it all. And maybe we really have to, as Senator Greenidge would have previously said, look at the entirety. Sir, the question that I would ask is this: has the BDF been positive in its functioning since 1979? I believe, sir, that all right-thinking Barbadians will say yes. I believe, sir, that all Barbadians would agree that the Barbados Defense Force has made a positive contribution to the development of this country and has been able to provide opportunities for Barbadians and to assist with the stability of this country. Mr. President, I therefore am in full support of this legislation, and with those few words, I am obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Grant. Senator McConney.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the sitting now be suspended until 3:30.
2:30. The question is that this sitting be suspended until 3:30 p.m. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This sitting now stands suspended.